The Antwerp Six. Antwerp Six. The Antwerp Six. Antwerp Six. The Antwerp Six. The Antwerp Six. The Antwerp Six. I'm sure that you, the average fashion enjoyer, know about the Antwerp Six. Of course you do. The legendary group of Belgian designers that helped put Antwerp on the map as a city that produces legendary fashion designers. But do you really know them? Here's a picture. Name all of them. Well done. You got Anne de Meulemeester, Walter van Beirendonck, Dries van Noten. What about the other three? Do they not matter? Honestly, before researching for this video, I knew about the collective. I knew most of their names, knew a lot about two of them, a bit about another, and nothing about what they did as a group, really, or their history together. While some are more known than others, I found all of their stories to be as interesting and significant for fashion today. And what they managed to do together as a group was quite remarkable. So here's a proper look through the history of the Antwerp Six. In about 10 minutes, I hope. They're called the Antwerp Six because there's 6 of them and they all graduated from the Antwerp Royal Academy of Fine Arts' fashion program in the years 1980 to 82. They then presented collections together in London in 1986 and were labelled the Antwerp Six by journalists who found all of their individual Flemish names difficult to pronounce. So there you go, end of video. The 6 members are Walter van Beirendonck, who graduated first in 1980, Anne de Meulemeester, Dries van Noten, Dirk van Zijn, and Marina Yee, who all graduated in 81, and finally, Dirk Bickenbergs, who graduated in 82. People like to throw Margiela in with them, although he graduated a year before Walter. And while he was definitely familiar and friendly with the designers before the group was officially put together, one major difference in career choices led to him not joining them to be at that infamous London show. While all 6 were definitely aware of each other during their time at school, they didn't all graduate together and form into a collective out of the gate. Like a lot of radical art collectives, they sort of came together through chance, and the man who brought the group together was Geert Bruloot. I'm pretty familiar with Dutch pronunciation, but the Antwerp Six are all Flemish, so I might get it a bit wrong. Please correct me if I do. I'll build a rough timeline for you to understand the journeys of each designers after their graduation up until the group is officially formed. In 81, Dirk van Zijn opens up his own boutique in Antwerp called Beauties and Heroes, and is also in a relationship with Walter van Beirendonck at the time. Spoilers, they're married today. How cute. In 82, Anne, I'm just gonna call her Anne, wins the inaugural Golden Spindle Award, a prize created by the Belgian government to promote the country's textile industry. Both Dirks, Van Zijn and Bickenbergs goes on to win it each over the next couple of years. In 83, Walter starts showing collections under his own name. 84, Geert Bruloot comes on the scene and opens a store in Antwerp called Cocodrillo. Him, Van Zijn, and Walter met through their stores. Later that year, Margiela comes to Bruloot's store to sell his first shoe collection, featuring this strange ninja shoe design, which Bruloot loved and stocked. He later recalled that Anne ended up buying a pair of Margiela's first tabbies. This year, Margiela would also go out to work as an assistant to Jean-Paul Gaultier, which I promise is relevant. In 85, Anne de Meulemeester launches her own line, and Bruloot meets Dries van Noten when Van Noten approaches him to do scenography for the Golden Spindle contest, which he agrees to. Bickenbergs then wins the contest that year with his shoe designs. Bruloot started talking to him and ended up agreeing to sell Bickenbergs' shoes at his shop. And in 86, that's where the gang gets together and shows at London. I couldn't find much info on Marina Yee during this time, but her story started with meeting Margiela before either of them were enrolled at Antwerp. They were very close friends and even romantically involved on and off. Maybe they worked more closely together than Marina did with the others of the Antwerp Six, I'm not sure. Either way, all designers were familiar with each other and with Bruloot in 1986. Just before showing at London, Bruloot and some of the graduates had made a trip to Tokyo to sell their clothes. But Bruloot had grown tired of traveling around Europe and even internationally with the designers to sell their shoes and clothes. So he had the idea to show their products at a major fashion week, which would potentially be seen by a lot more buyers. See, in the 80s, the likes of Comme des Garçons, Yohji Yamamoto, and Vivienne Westwood started becoming the talk of fashion weeks with their deconstruction and punk ready-to-wear lines. Ready-to-wear as a concept had only started to be popularized in 1966 by Yves Saint Laurent, but up until the 80s, ready-to-wear lines were still considered secondary to the more expensive couture lines. But clearly this was changing. The Japanese shows also featured street-casted models instead of famous top models, and the set was just chairs in a room. This setup was more logistically and financially viable for the Belgian graduates, and so Bruloot hatched a plan to show at London Fashion Week, which was also making a name for itself at the time due to young and courageous designers like John Galliano and Bodymap. So don't underestimate how influential the Japanese designers were in their time. They changed fashion with more than just their clothes. They gave smaller designers a chance. Smaller designers could hide the fact that they were small scale and couldn't afford the glamour which was needed before to be taken seriously. At first, the plan was to go with Bickenbergs' shoes, and Walter would make a collection of clothes for the London show. Dries van Noten, who Bruloot had been closely working with, asked to come and present his first proper collection with the group. This prompted Bruloot to also invite his other fashion designer friends, Anne de Meulemeester, Marina Yee, Dirk van Zijn, and Marta Margiela. They all accepted, and so they rented a truck and brought themselves and their clothes to London. Except because Margiela was working for Jean-Paul Gaultier at the time, he politely declined and showed independently 2 years later. What a blunder. What a blunder for Margiela, considering how well the Antwerp Six did for themselves, am I right? Here's a fun fact. According to Dries van Noten, the group thought about changing their names, worrying that they may be too Flemish for people to be able to pronounce. But they decided against it since the press had no problem with names like Yoji Yamamoto. Which, fair enough. I think their names are quite cool. However, they were all jealous of Marta Margiela for having a good name to start with, which I agree. I've always thought Margiela was a very euphonious name, and it added to the whole allure of his character. In London, the Belgian designers showcased on the first floor of the Olympia exhibition hall. They weren't showing on a runway, it was more of a fair that went on for multiple days. And on the first day, none of the major buyers of shops like Barney's went upstairs. So the next day they made flyers and started handing them out, and sometime around mid-afternoon that day, Barney's was there and made their first order for the Belgian. And as the story goes, an hour later it was full of press. Cameras around asking, "Where did you come from? It's like you came from another planet. We never heard of you. This is so fantastic." As they could not pronounce our names, they just started calling us the Antwerp Six. This is the second opportunity to end the video, and I will take it this time. And that, along with Margiela, is how Belgium and Antwerp came to prominence in the fashion industry. The group continued showing together until they became too important in London, and in around 1992, the British Fashion Council chased them out, so they moved to show at Paris, a city that just wanted the best of the best fashion designers. They didn't really care about nationality. Unfortunately, though, this is where the group kind of split up. Dries van Noten was the most commercially successful at the time, so his show had to get bigger. Dirk Bickenbergs only did menswear, so he had to split up from the rest of the group to show at a different time. Marina Yee failed to commercialize her clothes adequately, and after becoming depressed, chose to withdraw from the high fashion world altogether. Also at this time, Dirk van Zijn, who was experimenting with other art forms, self-published a collage comic called Bambi, in which he mocked the other Antwerp designers, particularly Anne, which she was rightfully unhappy about. So by the time they actually got to Paris, there wasn't much of a group left. They all went their separate ways and did their own thing on the runway. They didn't need to show at a fair together anymore. They had all grown up. I've seen many opinions on the Antwerp Six. Some people say that they were never a proper collective because they all had distinct styles to each other, and they were only grouped together by reporters, not by choice. Or that they never actually properly worked collaboratively or for that long. And even mentioning Margiela alongside the Antwerp Six might come with some contempt, even though I think I've explained why he is related to the group. The group may not have been collaborators, but clearly they worked very closely alongside each other, which I think was remarkable considering how different all of their styles were. Of the more well-known three, Anne Meulemeister found major success behind her Japanese-influenced but more gothic, somber aesthetic. She used a lot of black, grey, and whites, but she did stray into other colors at times. She started off quite minimalistic with an emphasis on details, but I like how her work has developed into something even more detailed and poetic, you could say, in the 2000s. My favorite quality of hers is the emphasis on cuts and silhouettes. I think there is something for the edgier side of everyone from Anne Meulemeister. Walter van Beirendonck, I made a whole video on him. He's one of my favorite designers, period. His style is vibrant, loud, and humorous, but still serious. I appreciate the extremely unique vision that he brings to fashion and that he's still working today. Good on him. Go Van Beirendonck. Dries van Noten is known for his amazing vibrant pattern work, both in pattern making and the patterns put on his clothes, frequently revisiting old patterns and remaking them. I'll be honest, I know much less about Dries than the other two. Full garment patterns just aren't really my thing, but I appreciate his clothes whenever I see them, and his pattern making is incredible. Of the lesser known three, Dirk Bickenbergs stuck with menswear, but ended up specializing in more commercial, generic sportswear, thanks to his love of football. He showed collections at the Camp Nou, which is Barcelona stadium, and even owned and designed for a low-league Italian team. While he may not be held in such high regard as the others for his venture into fashion with more mass appeal, his brand still exists successfully today, and not to mention he created one of my favorite boots of all time, better than the Anne backlaces and Margiela tabbies. That's right, Flamey, the bungee metal heel is the GOAT. Dirk van Zijn mainly designed clothes out of his boutique and rejected international success. He didn't want to have a brand attached to just one aesthetic or distinct style, which meant sacrificing a commercially viable image. He also didn't want to be a part of the toxic fashion system altogether, and still has a lot of disdain for the fashion industry today. He went on to work in a lot of different media like sculpture and pottery alongside fashion. Marina Yee had a similar outlook to Van Zijn, withdrawing from the global fashion system in 1990. First, after not finding commercial success, but she says ultimately she's happy with her choice. She was an early advocate for a more eco-conscious approach towards high fashion. Her style often involved redesigning and upcycling clothes that she found in flea markets, concerned with the wastefulness of fashion back in the 1980s. I'm sure she isn't pleased with how fashion has turned out since then. Her model for making clothes is honestly the one I respect the most. She just comes back whenever she feels like presenting something, and it tends to be in her typical avant-garde upcycled style. I understand why designers show multiple times a year, multiple seasons, I get it. But in an ideal world, it would be cool if designers just showed when they had something really, I guess, unique to put out. As she was very good friends with Margiela back in the day, perhaps she was influential to him with her sustainable approach. Margiela also frequently redesigned clothes he found from flea markets. Just a theory, Margiela heads. Okay, relax. Just a bit of fun theorizing. I'm not sure if she still does, but she also went into teaching, going between the Hague and Ghent's fashion academies. Walter also taught at Antwerp until his recent retirement from his role there. Crazy, huh? How diverse this group was. Some were similar to others, but the group hit all the boxes. From Anne and Walter's avant-garde independent high fashion houses to Dirk Bickenberg's commercialized sportswear. Dries Van Noten's acclaimed runway success to Marina Yee and Dirk Van Zijn's resistance to everything that the fashion industry stood for. Although they seem so different to each other, I think their mindset on a lot of things is what connected them as a collective. You can see that they all had similar feelings on certain things. They just had different approaches. They were a collective of true individualists, not wanting to be swayed by trends or being on season. Bickenberg's definitely could have had a career in high fashion, but fuck it, he wanted to go design jerseys. Andy Meulemeister and Walter van Beirendonck never swayed from their visions. This cost Walter his label in the 90s, Wild and Lethal Trash, because he refused to commercialize going into the new millennium, and so the investors basically removed him. And without him, that label inevitably failed. Marina and Van Zijn, well, their actions speak for their individualism. And Dries Van Noten, who is definitely the most mainstream, is still very down to earth. He's been approached but refused to sell to LVMH or Kering, lives and works in his home in Antwerp, not in a fashion capital. He'll focus on the same theme and patterns for multiple seasons, and he stays away from the fashion parties and big city events. Why? Well, another uniting characteristic is the group's general disdain for the fashion industry. I'm sure you can see how Margiela would have fit in with this lot. Van Zijn and Marina Yee left the industry pretty early as acts of rebellion. Anne D left her brand in 2013 with an impromptu note. Bickenberg's left the drama of the high fashion world pretty quick as well, leaving really only Walter and Dries, who are still working into their old age, but still independently. To me, the Antwerp 6 is the ultimate expression of creative freedom and all of the paths that can include. I feel like we could do with more independent fashion designer collectives. I think the Antwerp 6 proved you can still be yourself working alongside like-minded people. The last major fashion collective that I can think of is Bin Drill, but two of those guys went on to work at major fashion houses, which isn't exactly what I'm looking for. Who's to say this group would have found success if they didn't arrive in London altogether? Belgium really meant nothing in fashion, and individually, I feel like these designers would have had a much tougher time. Who knows, but strength in numbers, right? Even when the Japanese designers came, it was Yohji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo that showed together. Well, they showed separately, but they arrived in the same year in Paris. Since these designers first entered the limelight, the world of fashion has changed a lot, but I think there is still valuable information you can take from their rise and their individual stories, even of the lesser known ones, which I think will still appeal to a lot of people. Today, Marina Yee believes that Gen Z are the future and brightest hope for the fashion industry. And I agree with her. Millennial fashion sucked. Remember hipsters? Most of my favorite designers right now are millennials, I guess, but I am really interested to see what Gen Z is going to produce. I have hope. Anyway, here's a quote to end on from Marina that, when I read, really stood out to me. She framed what beauty, art, and fashion is all about in such a simple, elegant way. I felt the way she described in the quote after I read it. Beauty is not just finding something beautiful, nice, tasty, or exciting. To me, it is about consciously experiencing something that feels good and loving. Whether it's watching your pet sleep peacefully, a fascinating piece of art, a stunning blossom, being at the receiving end of a kind gesture, or tasting a delicious dessert. It is to watch and really see, to live and feel intensely. It is to enjoy and feel happy, both about the small daily things and about the mysterious intangible things that instill quiet admiration and emotion. I am an incorrigible romantic. Beauty to me is an expression of love in shape, matter, and emotion. You didn't think I was going to end the video without mentioning my Patreon, did you? This week's video was on what you should know about materials when shopping for new clothes. And I'm going to have another video tomorrow all about one member of the Antwerp 6. Which one? I don't know. You'll have to find out. Okay, bye.